It was 70 degrees Fahrenheit 2 days ago, and today it is snowing. Good morning, lovelies. So my inbox and DMs are full of people telling me that they're just starting their writing journey, that they have a rough draft, that they have a story idea but don't know where to start, and would I perhaps have any tips to share? I never answer these because there are frankly too many, and I do not have the time or patience to respond to every single bit of fan mail or DM. I wish I did, but I don't. But I can make a YouTube video about it. So today I am sharing my top 10 bits of advice for beginner writers. If you've been on this journey for a while, you've probably heard a lot, if not all of these. So if you've picked up any tidbits that I have missed or that work well for you, put them in the comments of this video. Before we get started, a quick housekeeping note. My second full-length novel, The Witch Who Trades with Death, is available in all book formats. It is a standalone epic fantasy about a young woman who trades pieces of her soul to death in order to escape and fight back against an evil emperor. My debut novel, CITADEL, is also available in all formats. This one is science fiction. The Blackwing novella series is the only story that I have that is not yet available in audio, but we are getting there. Okay, let's just dive in. Tip number 1, understand the truth about writing advice. Writing is an art. It's not a science. That means there is no one way to do it. You're going to hear all kinds of advice from every corner of the internet. And while some are very standard and universal, such as study the craft and practice as much as you can, most of it is subjective. It might work for a lot of people, but might not necessarily work for you. And some of it is just opinion passed off as straight up fact. For example, a very common piece of writing advice that's been making the rounds for the last few years is to make your villain sympathetic. Your villain should think they're the hero of the story. This does work for some stories, like Killmonger from Black Panther, but it does not work for every story. Pure evil villains are what built Disney into the powerhouse that it is. It helped make Lord of the Rings the titan of epic fantasy. But when people try to make those types of villains sympathetic or the heroes of their own story, it usually sucks. Except for Maleficent. That one was a banger. And let's not forget the more complex villains like Tywin Lannister. He's not necessarily pure evil as he is working for the good of his house, but he does a lot of evil acts that he knows are evil, but he does them anyway. Yet compared to Joffrey and Ramsay, I don't think he even cracks like the top 5 of the most evil people of that series. Top 10 maybe, but not top 5. Tywin is not a hero. He does not think he's a hero. He's just doing what he feels is necessary. Facts and opinions are two very different things, guys. You might think that sympathetic villains are the best, and that's great. Read and write those villains, but it's not a universal truth. Good writing is any writing that works. And good writing advice is anything that gets you to create something that you're proud of. So keep that in mind. Having said that, writing is a skill, and you need to learn and practice this skill to get better at it. You learn the rules before you break them. This leads me to my next point. Number 2, take classes. If you have the money, I highly recommend that you pay for traditional writing classes. If you're a college student, sign up for creative writing courses. If a local author is hosting a class at your community center, sign up. If you can pay for Skillshare or a personal mentor, do it. Obviously, you want to do your research to make sure that these teachers and classes are legit. It is very easy to get scammed these days, especially with mentors. Make sure that they've actually published books in your genre and that they're good. But I can honestly say that my writing improved a whole lot after I got some actual learning by a professional. And a lot of these classes also do peer review, where you all share your stories with each other and then critique them. It's terrifying, but it helps a great deal. Not only do you get good feedback on your story, but critiquing other people's work gives you a keener eye for self-editing, which is a critical step in the writing process. You can't do revisions if you don't evaluate your own work, and evaluating other people's work is great practice. Tip number 3, book recommendations. In addition to learning directly from a professional, you do want to do some self-educating too. There are a lot of books out there about writing, and I encourage you to read as many reputable ones as you can. I've noticed that every time that I read a book about writing, even if it's largely things that I already know, my writing tends to improve. or at the very least, I get a nice little burst of motivation and inspiration that keeps me going for a few days. I have 3 recommendations. Stephen King's On Writing, obviously. Ironically, this is the only Stephen King book I've ever enjoyed because I just cannot with his writing style. I've tried. Now, that is a subjective thing. I have the same issue with N.K. Jemisin. It just goes to show that no matter how talented you are, there will always be people out there who just don't like your work for whatever reason. King's book here is less of an instruction manual and more half autobiography, half here is how I write. Again, not all writing advice is going to work for you. King is what we call a pantser. He flies by the seat of his pants and does not plan or outline anything. Good for him. I can't do that. I need a very detailed outline and to have the major characters and most of the world figured out before I even start chapter 1. Still, there is some good advice in there. If nothing else, it is a good insight into what a writing career can look like before and after you make it. Christopher Vogler's The Writer's Journey. This guy worked with Disney on projects like The Lion King, so he knows what he's talking about. This one breaks down the 7 major archetypes you find in pretty much every story, as well as the hero's journey, which is one of the most common outlining tools in existence. He's modernized the hero's journey a bit from Joseph Campbell's original version, which is good because that one had more than a few problems with it. He does say that a hero's journey is different from a heroine's journey, which I disagree. I think that it's a pretty universal human experience, and women and men are just marketed different types of stories based on centuries of patriarchy and gender roles. Having said that, still a good read. Finally, my favorite of these recs, Jessica Brody's Save the Cat writes a novel. The original Save the Cat book was about screenwriting. Brody made a version specific to novels, even though frankly there is a lot of overlap on the basics of things like characterization and plot structure are largely the same. But I appreciate the extra attention anyway. She's a big fan of the 3-act story structure, which is coincidentally what I use in pretty much all of my stories. And she does a great job of breaking down the most important plot points in any given story, where they fall, and the general rules that most authors follow concerning characters' actions and changes. This is good especially for a character-driven story, which most authors write these days because audiences tend to prefer more active characters. I recommend that you read all 3 of them and at least try out the exercises and tips. Figure out which ones work best for you, and then go from there. Tip number 4, YouTube recommendations. YouTube is full of author channels. You are watching one right now. Here are some others that you should explore. Brandon Sanderson has done several classes and interviews that you should check out because it is Brandon fucking Sanderson. Just Right is a channel that largely focuses on movies and screenwriting, but again, there is a ton of overlap between that and traditional writing. It can be a little harsh, but critics usually are. Hello Future Me has a lot of writing videos. I personally find his world building series the most helpful, especially since he compares fictional societies with real life history so you can see the parallels and how the authors may have pulled from or ignored actual human events. Jenna Moresi is an indie author who has a ton of videos both on writing advice itself and how to publish and market your book. She's incredibly blunt and honest about the writing process and publishing industry, so I highly recommend her, especially if you want to turn this into a career. It's a really good reality check. Overly Sarcastic Productions has a Trope Talk playlist that I have found particularly helpful, especially when I need to get out of a writing slump. Their history videos are also, of course, a really good starting point for research when I'm doing world building. Art of Fiction is a very science-heavy channel that was useful in creating the unique planet Ada lead in my sci-fi book, CITADEL. And Terrible Writing Advice is a satirical channel where he gives obviously bad advice. It's hilarious, but you do find some gems in there too. The actual good advice is always dismissed by the narrator, and it's funny every time it happens. I'm going to add Cinema Therapy as an honorable mention. It's a filmmaker and therapist who break down movies. The filmmaker goes into why the actors and or directors made these decisions, while the therapist goes into the psychology of the characters themselves. When they do bad movies like Twilight, you can see them diagnose where things went wrong with the script or execution. And when they do good movies, they usually end up crying on screen. It's great. You might also want to follow Daniel Green. He does book news every week, covering ongoing issues like generative AI, unfair practices against authors by companies like Amazon and Spotify, scandals, basically things in the writing world that you should keep an eye on if you're going to turn this into a career. I need to go on a quick tangent. While writing this script, I realized that I hadn't seen a video from iWriterly in a while. This gal named Megator used to be a literary agent and gave advice to writers from that end of the industry, which is very helpful. And I used to watch her videos all the time and found them really useful. So when I was putting together this list, I looked her up. The channel is gone. Her website is gone. And I'm like, did she die? What the hell? Turns out she came out with her debut novel, The Cyborg Tinkerer, and it sucked. She had built up this whole channel about writing advice and had been promoting this book for years. I remember seeing her nonstop promos for it, and then it just completely bombed because she did not take her own advice. Apparently, the book was bad enough to tank her whole YouTube career. On top of that, I heard, and this is unverified, so take it with a grain of salt, but I heard that she had only worked for her literary agency for like 6 months before getting fired, but she pretended she worked in the field for much longer. I bring this up because we are living in the age of misinformation. There are a lot of scammers on the internet, and they will do or say anything for a paycheck. So do your research into who you're learning from, especially if they start selling you stuff. And to put my money where my mouth is, the CM in CM is Christina Marie. I graduated from Hamline University in 2017 with a double bachelor's in history and social justice with a concentration in creative writing. Before CITADEL, I did publish a few novellas and short stories under a different name. They were fun, but I definitely made a lot of mistakes. Guys, I even did the barrier gaze trope in one of my first novellas, purely for shock value. Oops. Number 5, become an expert in your genre. By which I mean, read the types of books you want to write. If you want to write a mystery novel, you need to read a lot of mysteries, both the classics and the modern. Fantasy, same deal. Romance, absolutely. Don't just consume them for fun, take notes. What archetypes and tropes pop up most frequently? When does the meet cute happen? What trends are particularly popular and what's going out of style? How is the magic system explained? Is there a certain angle or type of character missing that perhaps you could take advantage of in your work? You've got to get a lay of the land before you can start writing. Subverting tropes only works if you're familiar with how they're supposed to go. And when you're done reading, number 6, connect with fans. Go to conventions, library events, connect with them in Discord servers, join Facebook groups, get book recommendations from them. The more you interact with fans, the more you're going to see patterns emerge. You'll be the first to hear from this particular group of people that you eventually want to market to is really sick of this specific trope, or they really wish for that type of character. Also, you get some friends, obviously. But from a writer's perspective, this is basically boots on the ground research. Note, do not start marketing your book to them. Not until it is written and you have a publisher and publication date. And even then, tread carefully. Authors, especially debut and indie authors, often try to infiltrate reader spaces to market their books. And I see why. You want to go where the fans are and sell to them. Guys, I made the same mistake. But it happens so much that a lot of these reader spaces get shut down entirely because it's just a bunch of authors trying to sell to them, not actually connecting with other people. A lot of groups have rules about authors self-promoting. Read them, follow them, or you will be kicked out. And this can actually sour people toward your work. They're going to see the cover in stores, and instead of going, oh, that looks cool, the reaction's going to be, ugh, it's the person who wouldn't shut up about their book and kept spamming our feed. Just tread carefully. Number 7, connect with other writers. Online writing groups, classes, conventions, whatever. You want to connect with the author community, particularly the same authors in your genre. Writing is a very solitary pursuit. So having a relationship with other people who are going through the same trials and tribulations that you are can be a serious lifeline. Reach out. Make friends. We are all awkward introverts, so it's fine. Author communities tend to share resources with one another, such as writing advice videos or books that they have found helpful. Some authors host writing sprints. The idea of author communities was half the point of NaNoWriMo and why it became so big. I myself have a Discord for my patrons over on Patreon that includes a writer's corner. They also, most importantly, read each other's work. And they do this before submitting to editors to help each other improve. Most of the time, this is a quid pro quo, by which I mean you critique their work while they critique yours. Everybody wins. Number 8, learn the basics, by which I mean grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, everything that we slept through in English class. If a reader opens your book and it is full of grammar mistakes, they're going to close it and put it right back. That type of thing might fly on archive of our own, but not for a product that we are paying for. And editors and agents are so inundated with manuscripts that they look for any excuse to disqualify something. If they see that your manuscript doesn't even have proper grammar, it's going in the bin. You won't even get a rejection letter. Now, I don't mean that a single typo or misspelling is going to destroy your writing career. One or two of those are bound to sneak in. Hell, they sometimes wind up in published versions, no matter what we do. But there should be no more than one grammar mistake or typo per chapter on average before you start querying literary agents. That is a low-effort fix for them. I mentioned the books and classes. Those will help you learn the other basics, like story structure, characterization, exposition, all that jazz. And finally, you want to learn the basics of the publishing industry itself and how to market your book. Because writing your book and selling it are two very different skill sets, and we see that play out all the time. There are a lot of incredible books out there that get absolutely buried because there was no marketing plan, or books that are absolutely trash yet become bestsellers because they were marketed extremely well. We've all run into those. Number 9, write when you can, because writing every day just isn't feasible. I hear it all the time. You have to write every single day if you're going to be a serious author. This is bullshit. All right, this is my full-time job, and even I don't write every single day. That'd be like going to your 9 to 5 every single day. No matter how much you love your career, you have to take breaks. You have to take days off, or you will burn out. And the vast majority of you aren't going to be writing full-time anytime soon. Anyway, meaning you probably already have 1 or even 2 jobs to pay the bills. When I worked at Briano's Deli Italia, there were days when I had 10-hour shifts, not including the commute. Guarantee that I got 0 writing done on those days. I was spent. 4-hour shifts? Yeah, I'll write on those days, absolutely. And days I had off, I will happily procrastinate, doing laundry and dishes to crank out a few chapters of my fantasy world. Before that, when I was in college and working a day job, I'd bring my laptop with me everywhere. And I would write in the gaps in my schedule, during my lunch hour, while eating, during the half-hour wait for my bus, while on the blue or green line. So the blue or green line is this quasi-train thing that we have in the Twin Cities. It's basically an above-ground subway. I couldn't write on the actual bus because then I would get sick, but the train? Yeah, I'll write on that. Like every new skill, it's all about time management and balancing your own mental health. Take your laptop or tablet or notebook with you and see what opportunities open up. If that doesn't work, carve out time in your actual calendar. Block it off like you would a meeting or class and guard it. Use what time you have to write what you can. It might slow you down, but a little effort every few days is better than no effort at all. And number 10, understand that you will never stop learning. There's always a new trick that you haven't uncovered, always a new process that someone else is using that might prove useful to you, always a new software to try out. Even without that, you yourself will evolve as an author. Your style will change, as will your schedule and your needs. I used to use a notebook exclusively for ideas and world building before transferring that to my laptop. Now it's almost all digital. On top of that, you'll figure out your own strengths and weaknesses. You might become an expert at characterization and dialogue, but realize you're not great at world building or descriptions. So you start learning to do those better and strengthen them, only to find that your pacing is kind of weird. So you work to improve that. Your characterization was always good, but after a few more years, you can be more subtle about it. For me personally, I've learned that while I am great with world building, dialogue, and protagonists, I'm not so good with villains, my pacing gets a little wonky, and my romantic subplots could probably use some work. Now, sometimes you can kind of do a judo flip. For The Witcher Traced with Death, I had a really hard time characterizing the villain, because I have a genuinely hard time figuring out why anyone would act like such a dick. So I used the magic system that I had cooked up to turn that bug into a feature. The evil emperor doesn't have much of a personality because he literally traded it away for power. He gave up his compassion, his empathy, his conscience, his passions for everything except conquest and ruling, and most of his memories for power and immortality. He literally turned himself into an inhumane monster that, bonus, I didn't have to characterize. These days I can sort of do a sympathetic villain. You guys will see what I mean when CaFae Latte novel Heart of Iron comes out. I really had to work to figure out Red Wolf's deal. He was barely in the first draft, as my patrons will tell you, and for all the time I spent workshopping the world and plot, I spent at least twice as long on him and his posse, because obviously he needed minions. The romance, guys, I'm a romantic asexual, so that's probably always going to be a weakness. I'll keep giving it an honest try, but that's probably just something that people aren't going to come to me for, and that's okay. Writing is a skill, and it is also a vast field. Think of the difference between a memoir, a historical biography, an epic fantasy adventure, and a contemporary romance. And that's not even accounting for different audiences, like children's versus middle grade versus teen versus adult. There's always something to learn. There's always something to improve upon, which means you'll never get bored. Those are my top 10 tips for newbie writers. If you are an experienced author, especially if you're published, put your tips in the comments below. I will see you next week. Bye, lovelies.
In the forest deep where shadows fall, lives a queen who stands so proud and tall. The throne of whispers, her kingdoms call, with dragons fierce who hearken all. Through the misty woods her anthem rings, a symphony of wild and wondrous things, with scales and wings and ancient kings. She's the spirit of forgotten springs. Raise your voice like a dragon's roar. Queens of old, we will be no more. In our hearts we feel the core, strength and power forevermore. The night is dark, but she shines so bright, guiding souls with her ethereal light. With strength and grace she takes her fight, a beacon in the endless night. From the ashes she will rise anew, her legacy both firm and true, a melody for the brave and few, in the lands where dreams and dragons flew. Raise your voice like a dragon's roar. Queens of old, we will be no more. In our hearts we feel the core, strength and power forevermore. Raise your voice like a dragon's roar. Queens of old, we will be no more. In our hearts we feel the core, strength and power forevermore. In a castle dark and cold, where stories of old are told, the princess waits alone, in her heart a heavy stone, her crown a burden grand, in a silent empty land. Stars above refuse to gleam, in her eyes there's just a dream. Once upon a tear she cried, for the love that never died. In whispers of the night, her heart took flight. Diamonds in her lonely eyes reflect the moon's pale guise. A fairy's gentle song echoes memories long gone. Through shadows she moves slow, footsteps soft like falling snow. Every night she fades away in the dawn's first gray. Once upon a tear she cried, for the love that never Once upon a tear she cried for the love that never died. In whispers of the night her heart took flight. Once upon a tear she cried